Hi, in this video, we're going to give you 5 tips on how to declutter faster. And decluttering is a whole process, and it's not a process that most people really enjoy unless you're a professional organizer or there's just something about organizing that you just absolutely love. But for the rest of us, cluttering is really something that's overwhelming and often very daunting for us. And because of those things, we don't like to do it. So with these 5 steps that I'm going to give you, you're going to have a process by which to help do your decluttering faster. Hi, my name is Deirdre Dunn. I'm a real estate broker in the Wellington and Waterloo regions of Ontario, and I help empty nesters downsize, help reduce the stress, the anxiety, the overwhelm using my 5-step process. I like to call it your next chapter. And before we begin, so that more people like you can see videos like this, if you could press the subscribe and like button, that would be great. Really appreciate it. So thanks. So let's begin. Yeah, decluttering is definitely a process. It's something that we often do because we're downsizing, but often because we get so much stuff around us that we feel cramped and overrun by our stuff. And that's not the purpose of the belongings that we own. They're actually supposed to bring us joy, be useful, have value for us. And yet somewhere along the line, we've lost that. So with these 5 tips, your process is going to go a lot faster. So let's begin. Tip number 1, put everything away. May seem like an obvious statement, but here's the reason why I say start with put everything away. Because when you start to put everything away, one of 2 things happen. One, you find things that don't have a home, so you deal with those first. And second of all, those things that maybe are left over and don't have a home, but you use them on a regular basis. They bring value to your life, yet they don't seem to have a home. It's because something else is taking up a spot in a cupboard or a closet for them that you probably aren't using. So how do you start this putting things away? I recommend starting with rooms that you use all the time. So kitchen, living room, family room are probably 3 places to start. You might want to start in a basement if it's not too decluttered. What I recommend is don't start in a garage, because a garage tends to be the collection area where we put a lot of stuff kind of out of sight, out of mind, and that can become really overwhelming and daunting. And you don't want to start something with such a big mountain to climb. You want to approach this and kind of build that momentum. So start by putting everything away and dealing with those obvious things that are left out, that don't have a home, and deal with those. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is get rid of duplicates. We probably all have duplicates of something. I was just recently going swimming and getting out our towels for the pool, and I realized that I have probably almost a dozen pool towels, and yet I don't need a dozen pool towels, so I have lots of duplicates there. Getting rid of duplicates works for all sorts of things: tools, appliances, clothing, linens, all sorts of things. So get rid of them. I know that my husband, when we downsized, he had lots of tools and he had lots of duplicates of stuff. And he would say, Deirdre, you don't understand. I have these 2 wrenches because, and I'd say, yeah, I understand that, but how often do you use this other wrench? And really, in reality, he really didn't use it hardly at all. He was keeping it for the what if, or I might need it, or maybe for this special situation, I'm going to have that tool. And yet, for all those occasions, you could probably rent it or borrow it. So getting rid of duplicates will help declutter. I had 2 crock pots, one that cooked way too fast, and yet I still kept it. I don't know why, but I did. So there is something to do. Tip number 3 is get rid of the things you don't use. And I'm going to reframe this in a more positive approach, because that's how people often say, get rid of the things you don't use. But here's a more positive approach to that. Keep the things that bring you joy, that you use on a regular basis and have value to you. Because when you look at it from that approach, number 1, it's much more uplifting approach. And it's a more positive way of looking at things. When we look at things we don't use, that opens up the door for self-criticism, self-judgment, guilt, overwhelm, and that doesn't help your process in making things go faster. So keep the things that bring you joy, that you use on a regular basis, because those are the things that you want around you to uplift your life, to make your life easier, simpler, more joyful. Okay, tip number 4, the UFOs. Nope, not the alien kind. UFO stands for unfinished objects or projects. And we all have a couple of those hanging around. So those projects, particularly if you're a crafter, so you have knitting, crocheting, scrapbooking, sewing. If you're kind of a handyman, do-it-yourselfer, you probably have a couple of projects that you started, or you've got all the pieces together to begin that. My husband was a great one to buy small plumbing and electrical stuff because he was going to do X. Except that, you know what, it never became a priority, so X never got done. Or you start a project and you haven't done it. And here's a guideline for you. If you haven't touched it in 3 to 6 months, it's unlikely you're going to actually finish that project because other things are a priority. It's just not a priority. So hand it off to somebody who wants to perhaps finish it. Or maybe those, the yarn, the things that you thought you were going to use, someone else can give it a life and use it in some way. So UFOs, unfinished objects, get rid of those. Tip number 5 is broken, partially broken, or you haven't put a hand on it in 12 months. Let's deal with those things. So I mentioned my crock pots. I had 2 crock pots. One worked, but it cooked way too fast, so I never used it. But yet I kept it around just in case. I needed it for, I don't know, a party. Maybe, I was going to be around and I could use it. But you know what? Whenever I went to look for a crock pot, I always chose my other one. So, and also some people keep partially broken things because for parts, except in this day and age, either you can buy the part at Canadian Tire, Lowe's, places like that, or unfortunately, they don't have parts for it and you have to buy a whole new one. So don't keep things that are broken. Other things that I've found people keep around are lamps that they really like the lamp, but it's just not working. Something's broken on it and they needs rewiring, whatever, but they have all the best intentions. So if you're thinking of things like, I'm going to do it, maybe it's going to work, maybe it's valuable, it'll be worth something, all those sort of anticipatory type statements, those are all things that are holding you back and not really useful in bringing you joy today, because we want things in our life that bring us joy today. And the last thing is, if you haven't put a hand on it in 12 months, you're probably not going to. Now, this is very true of things like cookbooks and clothing. Tools is another one. Records, maybe. So books, perhaps. So let's start with clothing. So if you haven't used it in this current season and you didn't use it in the previous season, it's unlikely you're actually going to use it again. Because what we do is we keep it around thinking, well, when I lose that 5 or 10 pounds, or maybe it'll come back in fashion, or, I just really like it, but yet you never wear it. And I did this with cookbooks. Before I downsized, I had all these cookbooks and I loved them. I loved looking at some of them and the photographs and reading the recipes, and yet I never used the cookbooks. So when I downsized, I actually went through my cookbooks and I kept only the ones I used. And I went from like this many down to like this many. And you know what? I don't miss the ones that I got rid of. I can't even remember some of them I got rid of because I never had my hand on them in 12 months. So that's a really great rule. So those are the 5 tips to help you declutter and downsize faster. It's a process and you can use these over and over again, this process. It works in any situation. And thanks for listening. Now, before you leave, if you haven't already, press the subscribe and like button so that more people like you could see it. I'd really appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next video.